Hello, everyone. Today we are excited to be here today on this broadcast. We are so thankful to have each and every one of you tuning in tonight to our broadcast, and we are going to be talking for just a little while. We'll have a discussion about grief. In life we all grieve in different ways. We all go through different situations, different circumstances, and so we want to get everybody to understand that uh, grief is real. Grief is no joke. Grief will cause us all kinds of heartache and all kinds of pain. Today we have a few people that is going to be on the broadcast tonight. Uh, I am Dr. Bruce Smith. This is the producer show, and we're going to be discussing, like we say, grief. And on our panel today, we're going to have Phyllis Knight out of Mansfield, Texas, and we're going to have Robert Mileage out of West Memphis, Arkansas. So we're asking you to listen. We're asking you to be excited about everything that is going to happen on this broadcast today. We ask you that you listen. We ask that you, if you have questions, we can actually see the comments on our screen. So if you have a thought, uh, bring it forth. If grief, which is what we're going to be talking about today, if that is something that is hard for you to deal with, uh, we want to talk about it. So today we got Phyllis Knight, like I say, out of Mansfield, Texas. Hi, Phyllis. And we
Hey, how
got
are you
Robert
today, Dr.
Mileage
Smith?
out of West Memphis, Arkansas. We're going to ask you, Phyllis, if you would first, we're going to go to you first and ask you uh, some of your thoughts about grief.
Well, um, I'll just say grief. I'm just going to give you the definition of grief. I think that's a good place to start. Grief is an acute emotional pain caused by having a loved one claimed by death. So, oftentimes when we experience grief, the first level of grief is oftentimes shock, that one of our loved ones has passed on. So, there are different stages of grief that a person would have to go through. I think, um, you know, when we lose a loved one, um, the acronym that best describe grief and how to get through grief is agape. Agape means love, and the Greek word agape is love. And the first step to accepting when we lose a loved one, like I said, using the acronym agape, is accept the death of your loved one, and
Right,
then G would be to grieve constructively,
right,
and A, articulate your feelings, and pray for strength and express your emotion. So
right.
a lot of times we don't grieve properly. We try to suppress the feelings. We
Hmm.
sometimes we don't accept that a loved one has passed on, and it
Right,
makes our grieving process um, longer. You know what I'm saying?
right.
So
Have you ever had to go through a period where you experienced what I call extreme grief? Because, see, grief isn't always the loss of a loved one. Grief,
right.
sometimes you could grieve, man, you could even grieve the loss of an animal. How it affects you as an individual. But I know when I think about how when my father died all those years ago, and I didn't even know it was grief what I was experiencing. I just felt lost, didn't have no connection, didn't know which way to turn, didn't know what to do, and I come to find out that that was grief, and I come to find out that without uh, trying to deal with it, without getting, because I had to get some help uh, for me to deal with the situation. uh, I did not know to, you sometimes you go to the church. Sometimes I learned that uh, sometimes you just need to go to somebody even outside the church, somebody that you can just talk to that is not going to share your business. Uh, and I
Mhm.
found that uh, communicating with somebody and telling them what you're experiencing, it helps so much uh, with dealing with it because you can some people grieve to point to where they're ready to commit suicide and all kinds of things. So it's not just the easiest thing to deal with. And I was in the military at the time, and I did not know how to go about dealing with
Mhm.
the situation. But uh,
Right.
I'm thankful now that I know uh, and know how to cope. uh, I can help somebody else.
Right. Well, like I said, the first step in grief is acceptance. Sometimes we don't want to accept the fact that the person is no longer with us.
Hmm.
And so, because we don't accept the fact that we have lost that loved one, you know, it's
Right.
hard to really begin the process of grieving and coming to the end of your bereavement period. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying? I mean, it's a process, and sometimes you can grieve for that person for years. We during
Right.
holidays, that level of grief during a person's birthday, special um anniversaries, like you said, often we grieve, like the loss of an animal. I know I've lost an animal that just last year. Um, and well, it wasn't mine, it was my son's dog. But when you have an animal that's been in your life, for 11 years, they're like family members. So you have that level of grief, when you lose even an animal.
Right.
You can grieve the loss of a job if you've been on a job for 20
Yeah.
years
Yeah.
and you
That's a big one.
suddenly
Yes.
are called into the office, and you let go or laid off or whatever. You can grieve that. There are all kinds of griefs that we experience in life.
Hmm.
But like I say, the first step and the first process to grieving is acceptance.
Right.
So a
Hmm.
lot of times, we're in a state of shock,
Right.
so because of the loss. So, until we get past step one as acceptance, then it's hard to go to the process of grieving constructively.
Right.
So,
Mr. Mallet, um, we'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, listening to both of you all's definition, I think I have grieved more over situations and circumstances than people. Uh, I haven't had any personal tragic losses, but just relative loved ones just naturally. But I appreciate you all uh, definition because I think I have survived life more than I've grieved it. I don't know if that makes any sense. I think I
Hmm.
survived more. I don't know really if ever had the time to process.
Right.
Am I grieving? Uh, so that's all I want to say on that for now.
Uh, One thing I've learned dealing with grief. Um, Grief. When I look back on my mother, and she was still alive, uh, but I did the majority of my grieving before she died because He walked me through the process. He showed me what was going to happen and actually when it was going to happen. Even up until the day that she died, God walked me through that. And when I was going to the hospital, I remember asking the Lord to allow me to get there before she died, and He agreed. And this is something I learned about God. If He tells you that He's going to do something, He's going to do it. Uh, and He told me that uh, when I would get there, she would still be alive. Now she was going through what I call the death process, but she was still alive, and so I was able to be there at the end. Um, Even dealing with that helped me to understand that all the stuff that she put in me growing up, and when she lived with me, the conversations we had, even while she had dementia, it helped me to understand that really, like she said, this ain't the end. So it helped me to be able to cope. So after I didn't grieve in the same way when my mother died as I did when my father died because I didn't know no better. I didn't know what to do. But when she was the Lord walked me through that, and that helped me tremendously. So I was more prepared, and I was able to deal with it. I didn't even cry until right at a year. Um, it was like right at a year, the Lord allowed me to just break down and cry and realize that you've done all you can. And when you've done all you can, that's all you can do. Um, and just what try to tell people nowadays that things gonna happen in life that you're gonna grieve about. But while you dealing with it, give your all. When you give your all, think about it. Realize that um, if you have a relationship with God, you need to know that He'll get you through it. And that's what helped me tremendously. Having that relate the first time, I wasn't there with God when my dad died, but when my mom died, I had that relationship. So that helped me tremendously. And I had dealt with death with some other people that were what I considered close, and it helped me to understand uh, how I needed to try to cope with it. Although when it happens, it still throws you in a tailspin sometimes.
Yeah. Well, you know, I know we had a brother that was missing for 28 years. Um,
Hmm.
and, you know, we could not properly grieve the loss of our brother because we didn't know it was a loss. We was holding out hope that one day we would find him and we would see him again. You know, after doing missing person reports and things like that, just trying to find where he was. I, I didn't grieve the 28 years. We didn't know where he
Right,
was. We didn't know that he wasn't no longer among us. But once we found out that he was deceased, then a process of grief set in because now
right,
the hope was gone that we would never have the opportunity to see him again. You know,
right.
so it was kind of it wasn't a shock, but it was a shock. You know, it was a shock in a sense
Hmm.
that, you know, we thought maybe we would find him. So, you know, grief is sometimes dealt with, you know, in different ways. It's handled
Right.
different
Hmm.
because of the circumstance. You know what I'm saying? I mean, because I hadn't seen him in so long, I mean,
Hmm.
I'm not saying it didn't hurt. It still hurt,
Hmm.
but it didn't hurt as bad as if, like one of my close brothers, you know what I'm saying? One of my closest siblings that I talk to on a daily basis, that would hurt worse. But because I hadn't spoke to him in almost 30 years, it didn't sting as bad. You know what I'm saying? Even though it was still grief. You know what I'm saying? And I still had to go through the process of, crying and letting it out. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So,
Right.
um, it depends on the situation and the circumstance. Sometimes, when we grieve and how we grieve. So, um, and just finding out, for me with my brother, it was just hoping that someone didn't like murder him maliciously. When I found out how he passed, it made it a little better. But
Right.
even still, right now, sometimes I still grieve the fact that I'll never see my brother again. You know what I mean? So last time I saw
Right.
my brother, I was in my early 20s. So um yeah, grief is done in different ways, and we have to cope with it in different ways.
Hmm.
There's a lot of times along with grief comes anger. There's guilt. You know what I'm saying? Depending on how a person
Right.
has, say for instance, you as a mother, you ask your child to go to the store
Hmm.
and to pick up something that you asked them to go pick up, and they either get shot or get in a car accident and get snatched from you like that. Then
Right.
you have the shock of losing your loved one, but not only
Exactly.
that, you
Hmm.
got the guilt.
Hmm.
Then you got to deal with the guilt. So like I said, there are different processes of dealing with grief. In a situation like that, then you got to deal with not only the shock of losing your child or your loved one, but now you feel guilty because had I not asked them to go to the store, my
Hmm.
loved one would still be here. So there's denial, that we deal with,
Right.
during grief, in the grieving process. You know what I'm saying? So we just can't believe that they're gone. And I think, like you said, with your dad, it's that I can't believe my dad is no longer here.
Right.
So and so because of that too, when a person passed away unexpectedly, like from a
Hmm.
heart attack or a stroke, or like you said, a car accident, or they get shot or something like that,
Hmm.
gang violence, or COVID-19,
Right.
I mean, it's that
Yeah, that's a
denial.
big one.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, this
Right.
past year, so many people have lost loved ones.
Right.
At the beginning of last year, we didn't think we were going to lose loved ones, not like that, not from
Right.
a virus. So we're dealing with people even right now who are dealing with grief and not being able to properly, lay their family members to rest. you
Right.
know that's hard. I mean,
Hmm.
when my mother passed, my dad passed, we were able to come together as a family and go to the repast. But now we got families that can't hug each other and share in that
Right.
last moment. The last time seeing their loved one body.
Right.
And so it's this year has been a lot of grief this year. You know.
Right. Robert, you like to add anything to this conversation?
Uh, yes, I go back to what you were saying, the experience that you had with your mother, plus it's night. And I was watching this lady on TED Talk. Name was Nora McNeely. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. But her subject
Hmm.
was we don't move on. We don't move on from grief. We move forward with grief. And you know, the experience that you had, that the Lord allowed you to have with your mother, you still have that within you, that experience. And I lost my sister a month ago, and I don't know if I've really grieved. I know when we went to the wake, of course, it was rough on me, and but I remember the relationship we had because we didn't grow up together,
Hmm.
and so I think about how she reached out to me and we got together, and I'll always cherish that. And so, I understand the concept that you don't move from grief, but you move forward with grief. That loved one will always be there. And what Miss
Hmm.
Phyllis was talking about, now, I think we can relate to as former soldiers. We understand the difference between someone
Airman.
dying of natural death versus getting killed. Natural death is, like if you
Right.
90 plus, you gonna live forever. I remember when my mom hit 90s, I said, Mom, what is it like to be 90? She said, Son,
Hmm.
they got a whole lot of pain. And she died at 93, and that's the premium. And I'll never forget she taught me that. And so I'm learning from the example that you all gave, but I hope and pray that this thought that you don't move from grief, but you move forward with grief. And back to your hand, Dr. Smith.
I had to go through a period where I had cancer, and you really don't know how that's going to turn out. Um, Me being in a family where none of my siblings had it, I'm the youngest of the boys. I'm not seem like I'm the only ones really have gotten sick. I've had issues, knee replacements, and all that. Uh, I can honestly say I grieved for myself when I was going through the cancer process because you know people tell you, "Oh, but baby, you gonna be all right," but they don't know what you experiencing. They don't know what you going through. So you grieve, or I did, because it caused the depression. Not only did I face grief, but it caused a depression to come up on me. Grieving, not knowing, thinking I may not make it. Because doctors tell you one thing and then the next thing happens, so you don't know. Uh, but I have to contribute everything getting through this process. Uh, was my relationship with God, which it seemed like you have to get tried through a situation to really understand what it really means to face it and to be able to deal with grief. Because I found for myself, I could not face it alone. It was like a consuming fire. Uh, I'll go to bed thinking about it. I'd wake up thinking about it. I go to work thinking about it. You don't tell nobody about it. When I was going through the radiation treatments, I told no one, uh, especially on my job. No one knew until I was done and deemed clear. So it's a thing where um, there's a lot of things in life that can cause us grief, distress, depression. When I think about losing a brother, not knowing that he's dead, when I think about all these folks that are losing their loved ones through this COVID-19, a lot of couldn't be in the room with them when they were crossing over. You couldn't have so many of them couldn't have funerals. So many of them were put in trailers and for long periods of time. Some of them were put in mass graves and never got to say goodbye. That will cause what I call extreme grief if you don't watch yourself. It can cause extreme depression. So we have to uh, develop an outlet in order to get beyond it and to get through it. It's not easy. Uh, my plan might not be your plan. What worked for me may not work for you. What worked for you may not work for me. So it's each every one of us have to look uh, for a way to cope and to deal with this situation. You think, and even thinking about the loss of a job, the loss of a home, the loss of, these things can cause some serious grief. And if if you ain't got some kind of connection with what I call somebody or with God or something, man, you can fold up. It's easy to fold up through this grief, and you just want to cash out and just say forget it. So it's so
Right.
many things we have to look at. And if anybody is dealing with grief, we want you to do whatever you have to do, get some help. It's no
Yeah.
shame to get some help. I can remember uh, going through a period where I went to a psychologist for about 6 month period, and she helped me to be able to cope with life itself because life throws so many things at you. Uh, you don't know what to do sometimes. So um, she helped me to get what I call an understanding of what's going on and how to adjust and how to deal with and how to not internalize so many things. And so I use those tools today. Even there's some tools that you can use to help to calm you down when things are going on. So um, I'm thankful uh, that I was willing to go see a psychologist and get the help I needed.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of times when a person is grieving, there is anger that come along with grief too. Say you had a loved one that was killed, like the sister was killed by her boyfriend. You know, on top of grief, for the loss of your sister or that loved one, you got the anger, that you have to deal with, and depression, that comes along with grief. I think depression is one thing that a lot of people, they don't get help for. That's they have that they it take them a long time to get through their grief because of the depression part. And like you said, a lot of times we don't go get the help that we need. Sometimes we need to get you know a medical help. We need to go see a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Sometimes we may have to get some antidepressants or something. But a lot of times we just try to cope with grief, and I'm not saying that we don't read the Bible or read scripture. Yes, we need
Hmm.
that, but sometimes we do need to go and see someone to help us to get through extreme grief. Sometimes you can grieve so much, not just from the death of a loved one. You can grieve over the fact that you have a child and your child can be a A+ student, and then they get caught up in drugs and alcohol and stuff like that.
Right.
And because of the
Hmm.
grief of not seeing your child be what you expected them to be,
Hmm.
that's another level of grief too, that sometimes we don't realize it's a grief. It's a
Right.
grief and a depression. And then it can affect you physically. It can affect your body.
Right.
You know, um, you can suffer grief from a divorce. You thought you were going to be with your husband and have happily ever after, and after 30 years he decides to walk away. That's grief.
Right.
So you know there are different types of grief, like we were saying earlier, that we go through. A lot of times, sometimes people don't, see it as grief. They may see it as depression, but it's grief. So
Right.
it's not always the death of a loved one that we're grieving. We're grieving
Right.
the death of
Exactly.
our marriage.
Hmm.
We
Right.
our marriage is no longer there, so that's a death of your marriage.
Right.
So because you thought that you were going to be with this person the rest of your life, and it didn't turn out that way. So then you got the anger that you're dealing with in your grief. You got the denial that you're not going to be with this person any longer.
Hmm.
You have the depression along with the grief. It's a lot. And a lot of times, sometimes people isolate themselves when they're grieving. They stay closed off in a room by themselves and they don't want to talk to people.
Right.
But you need to talk to someone, because you would get fall deeper into a deeper hole because you're not dealing with that grief. You're not dealing with that depression. You're not dealing with the
Hmm.
anger. You're not dealing
Exactly.
with the denial. You're not dealing with the shock. You know what I'm saying? So, we just can't, when we're grieving, gotta learn to not isolate ourselves, and we have to tell somebody, you know, I just need somebody to talk to today. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Or you just need to go find a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and go talk to someone, to help you through your process. Because a
Right.
lot of times, like when we lose a child or a loved one through like maybe gang violence, we're angry. Sometimes people get angry with God. You're like, why me? Why my child? You lose a infant child. You pregnant, and you carry your child almost to term, or sometimes have a baby stillborn. There's all kinds of grief that people go through. And like I said, right now during this pandemic, people are grieving, and I think a lot of people are not dealing with their grief. I mean, we're just trying to get through, you know what I'm saying? But
Hmm.
I think all of us are grieving to a certain degree right
Right.
now through this pandemic. We're grieving a loss of not being able to fellowship with our family, and
Right.
sit and have a meal, or hug our
Hmm.
grandchildren, or just sit with my mama, my grandmother. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Hang out with my
Hmm.
brothers and my sisters. I mean, they're not gone or deceased, but still, it's like a loss.
Right. It's so true. Um, I'm gonna ask Mr. Mileage, you got anything you'd like to add? We're gonna get ready to wind this up, and we'll be back on next week, and maybe go a little deeper into this because it's really a serious topic, and we want people to, if they would like to comment, like I say, uh, you can leave a comment on Facebook, or uh, you can chime in, and you have a thought or question, we can uh, come together and try to work through it. So, Mr. Mileage, you got anything you'd like to say before we get ready to wind this up?
Yes, if you give me the honor of reading this right quick, it's called A Guide to Surviving Grief. Cry whenever you need to. Scream. Lay on the floor. Sob in the shower. Be still. Run. Walk. Create. Live. Share without fear. Listen. Release your pain.
Hmm.
Breathe. Be courageous. Away the map. Wonder. Be real. Read. Seek friendship. Be vulnerable. Don't fear being broken. By Mr. Zoe Clark Coe. Thank you so much.
Well, we're going to get ready to um, close this out. Phyllis, you have any final words today? And then we're going to get ready to get off the air.
Um, I just want to, if you don't mind, I just want to read the Serenity Prayer, if you don't mind. I just think it's appropriate. The Serenity Prayer states, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think that's one of the first steps through getting through grief is accepting the things that we can't change. Some things we can't change, and some things we can, and we just got to know the difference between the two. So
Amen.
thank you for having me here tonight on your broadcast.
Yeah, we want to thank you, Phyllis, and you, Robert, for tuning in. And we'll have a conversation, and we may take this topic further on next week. Um, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is Dr. Bruce Smith, and this is the Producer Show, and we will see you on next week. Have a good day.